As twilight descended on Friday, May 23, 1927, Daniel ascended the steps to his grand mansion. Just as he reached for the doorknob, his butler swung the door open with a welcoming smile. Daniel returned the gesture and stepped into the warmth of his home. It had been a taxing day at his office in Chicago, Illinois, where he had been immersed in a significant real estate transaction. Now, all he yearned for was to reunite with his wife and 3 children, cherishing the comfort of home. Daniel had carved out a formidable reputation as a business magnate, initially gaining prominence in the early 1900s through his ventures in banking, where he specialized in extending substantial loans to gamblers. However, it wasn't until he assumed the presidency of the Rockford Watch Company and ventured into real estate that his wealth soared to staggering heights. His fortune, equivalent to approximately $70 million in today's currency, solidified his status as a titan in the bustling city of Chicago. Yet, despite his flourishing career, Daniel felt a growing desire to prioritize his presence at home with his beloved wife and children. Upon crossing the threshold of his opulent mansion, he shed his hat and jacket, eager to share an idea for an upcoming weekend getaway with his wife, Grace. However, Grace's preoccupation with their youngest son diverted Daniel's attention. Welcome to Bizarre Buzz, where we delve into the strangest and most captivating tales from around the world. Join us as we explore the depths of human curiosity, uncovering stories that will leave you both bewildered and fascinated. From unsolved mysteries to bizarre phenomena, we bring you the extraordinary, the unusual, and the downright surreal. Get ready to embark on a journey unlike any other, only here on Bizarre Buzz. Henry, a 14-year-old boy, was expected to return home immediately after school. However, as the clock struck 6 p.m., there was still no sign of him, leaving his parents concerned and clueless about his whereabouts. Daniel's reaction to this news was one of mild aggravation. Despite this unexpected delay, Henry was typically a commendable young man. Attending a prestigious boys' school nearby, he was held in high regard by both peers and teachers alike. Renowned for his intellect, Henry's teacher even proclaimed him to be the brightest student in his grade. Engaged in extracurricular activities such as the school's debate team, Henry consistently outshone older participants with his quick wit and eloquence. Furthermore, his innate leadership skills, diligent work ethic, and compassionate nature endeared him to those around him. However, Henry had a tendency to be somewhat irresponsible, particularly when it came to adhering to curfew. This wasn't the first instance of him failing to return home on time. Daniel reassured Grace not to worry too much, acknowledging that Henry often lost track of time. As they discussed Henry's absence, their older son entered the room and suggested that Henry might be at William's house across the street, engaged in a game of tennis on their private court. Despite the 4-year age gap between them, William and Henry shared a close bond, strengthened by their mutual love for tennis. Daniel decided to investigate and headed across the street to William's family mansion, while Grace continued making calls around town to locate Henry. Daniel left their home and began his journey toward William's residence in search of his son. Daniel resided in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in the entire country, particularly within the city limits of Chicago, South Kenwood. Picture a street lined with grand mansions, each housing business magnates or renowned figures. Every family in this neighborhood boasted a full complement of staff, including maids, butlers, drivers, and fleets of private cars. The residents of South Kenwood were among the wealthiest in society. Daniel crossed the street to William's family mansion, surrounded by opulence, and scanned the premises for any sign of activity. The private tennis court, usually bustling with his son and William, lay empty. The mansion itself exuded an eerie quietness, devoid of any occupants. Returning home, Daniel discovered Grace pacing anxiously in the parlor. Concerned, he immediately inquired about her findings. Grace relayed that she had spoken to one of Henry's friends, who disclosed that Henry had umpired a baseball game after school and had begun his walk home around 5 p.m. The school and baseball field were merely 3 blocks away, making it puzzling that Henry had not yet returned, especially considering it was now 6:30 p.m. At this juncture, Daniel's emotions shifted from irritation to genuine concern for his son's safety. Despite rationalizing that Henry was likely somewhere within the confines of South Kenwood, one of the nation's safest and most affluent neighborhoods, Daniel's paternal instincts drove him to seek out his son with urgency. Daniel reached out to a close friend residing in the neighborhood, a former state senator, and implored him to assist in the search for Henry. Upon the friend's arrival, the two men embarked on a somber walk down the street flanked by opulent mansions, heading towards the school where Henry had supposedly been umpiring. Arriving at the school, they discovered no baseball game in progress, and the building stood deserted, cloaked in darkness. However, Daniel and his friend speculated that Henry might have detoured into the school after umpiring the game, perhaps inadvertently getting locked inside. Determined to locate Henry, Daniel and his friend scoured the premises, eventually discovering an open window. They seized the opportunity, clambered inside, and meticulously combed through every nook and cranny of the school, but Henry was nowhere to be found. With each passing moment, Daniel's anxiety intensified. Despite his friend's attempts to reassure him, Daniel couldn't shake the ominous feeling that something dreadful had happened to his son. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, the two men sprinted back to Daniel's house. Bursting through the door, Daniel immediately called out to his wife, hoping for any news of Henry's whereabouts. However, the only response was silence. Racing through the house, they made their way to the parlor, where they had last seen Grace. Upon entering, a horrifying sight greeted them. Grace lay motionless on the ground, the phone abandoned beside her. Daniel and the senator rushed to Grace's side, desperately shaking her in an attempt to rouse her. Suddenly, with a gasp, Grace snapped awake, her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at Daniel. After Daniel managed to calm her trembling form, Grace recounted the harrowing ordeal she had experienced in their absence. A phone call had pierced the silence, and initially, Grace had assumed it was Henry checking in. However, it was a stranger's voice on the other end, a man she didn't recognize. He delivered the chilling news that Henry had been kidnapped, but reassured her that he was safe for the time being. The mysterious caller warned against involving the authorities, threatening dire consequences if they did so. He promised to provide further instructions soon before abruptly hanging up. The shock and fear of the call had overwhelmed Grace, causing her to faint, leaving her sprawled on the ground when Daniel and the senator returned home. That fateful night, Daniel, Grace, and their trusted state senator friend huddled together, grappling with the terrifying reality of Henry's abduction. Despite their instinct to involve the authorities, the ominous threat of harm loomed over them, leaving them torn and uncertain. Hours passed in anxious deliberation until, by 2 a.m., they reached a decision. Leveraging the state senator's connections within the police department, they devised a clandestine plan. They would approach the police, but swear them to absolute secrecy, ensuring the kidnappers remained unaware of the investigation. As dawn broke on May 24, 1927, Daniel and the state senator approached the police headquarters. They conferred with the highest-ranking officer, who pledged discretion. Thus, under the cloak of secrecy, a quiet investigation into Henry's kidnapping commenced. Meanwhile, across town, a man named Oliver navigated the bustling streets of downtown Chicago in a luxurious Willis night. Parking the car adjacent to a rental company, he smoothly returned the vehicle's keys to the clerk, feigning satisfaction with the rental experience. Exiting the shop, he rendezvoused with his accomplice, Jack, and swiftly departed in another opulent vehicle, disappearing into the city's labyrinthine traffic. Simultaneously, Daniel and Grace received a ransom demand, a chilling letter stipulating $10,000 in unmarked bills for Henry's safe return. Without hesitation, Daniel procured the ransom money from the bank. However, before he could deliver it to the designated location, a breakthrough occurred. The discreet investigation yielded a vital clue that would unravel the mystery. It took over a week of meticulous work, but the pivotal moment arrived when Oliver and Jack were brought in for questioning. What transpired in the interrogation room would reveal the shocking truth about Henry's ordeal. On May 7, 1927, precisely 2 weeks before Henry's disappearance, Oliver checked into room 99 of Chicago's Morrison Hotel. Upon arrival, he instructed the front desk to hold his mail. Over the ensuing days, Oliver made periodic visits to collect his mail, but curiously, he never seemed to ascend to his room. A vigilant maid, tasked with cleaning room 99 daily, grew suspicious when she consistently found it vacant and immaculately maintained. One morning, her curiosity piqued, she ventured to open one of Oliver's suitcases left behind. To her astonishment, instead of finding typical travel belongings, she discovered a collection of assorted library books. Following this unsettling discovery, Oliver abruptly ceased his visits to the hotel, neglecting to claim his luggage or settle his outstanding bill. He vanished without a trace. Just 2 days later, on May 9, Oliver embarked on further activities in Chicago. He initiated a bank account and made his inaugural visit to a car rental establishment, specifically requesting the prestigious Willis Knight vehicle. Access to such luxury cars necessitated a credible reference, which Oliver's associate, Jack, readily provided, enabling Oliver to secure the rental. About 2 weeks later, on May 28, the same day Henry went missing, Oliver and Jack cruised around South Kenwood in their Willis Knight car. They spotted Henry walking alone along the road. Jack, recognizing Henry as a skilled tennis player, had a question about a specific tennis racket. Instructing Oliver to pull over, Jack leaned out of the front seat and beckoned Henry over. Engaging in a conversation about the racket, Jack eventually offered Henry a ride home since it was in their direction. Jack moved to the back seat, Oliver remained behind the wheel, and Henry settled in the front passenger seat. With everyone situated, Oliver drove towards Henry's house while Henry continued discussing the tennis racket. Suddenly, in the midst of conversation, Jack retrieved a chisel from his pocket and viciously attacked Henry from behind, striking him repeatedly. Amid Henry's screams and attempts to defend himself, Jack pulled him into the back seat, subdued him, and then silenced him with a rag forcibly placed in his throat, holding it there until Henry ceased struggling. Following that, Jack grimaced at the sight of Henry's blood covering him, then pushed Henry down onto the floorboards below. Calmly, Jack climbed back into the front seat while Oliver remained unperturbed by the gruesome scene, treating it as routine. Instead of heading to Henry's house, Oliver and Jack drove towards Indiana. During their journey, they made a pit stop at a roadside restaurant, enjoying hot dogs and root beers with Henry's body laid out in the back seat. Upon reaching Indiana, they ventured into a familiar forest known to Oliver as a bird-watching spot. Parking in a clearing, they confirmed Henry's demise, stripped his clothes, wrapped him in a rug, and disposed of his body in a drainage pipe beneath railroad tracks in a swampy area. Returning to Chicago, Oliver deceitfully assured Henry's mother, Grace, that her son was kidnapped but alive, urging her not to involve the police. That night, they incinerated Henry's clothes, cleaned their rental car, and played cards before retiring. The following day, coinciding with the commencement of the police investigation into Henry's disappearance, Oliver and Jack sent a ransom letter to Daniel and Grace, demanding $10,000 for Henry's safe return. However, before they could collect the ransom, Henry's body was discovered by a passerby in the Indiana woods. Realizing their scheme had unraveled, Oliver and Jack promptly returned their rental car and resumed their normal lives, pretending as though nothing had transpired. Unknown to him, Oliver had inadvertently dropped his unique eyeglasses beside Henry's body when disposing of him in the Indiana woods. These glasses, exclusive to a single store globally, became a pivotal clue for detectives upon discovering Henry's remains. Tracing the glasses back to the store, the owner confirmed their sale to Oliver. Initially deflecting blame onto Jack, Oliver eventually confessed to the murder alongside Jack on June 4. However, the revelation of their identities proved more astonishing than their crime. Oliver and Jack were not who they claimed to be. They were affluent youths from South Kenwood, using the aliases Oliver Rick and Jack Smith. Booking room 99 at the Morrison Hotel under false pretenses, they left a suitcase of books to feign occupancy, using the hotel as a mailing address for their fake personas. By collecting mail addressed to Oliver Rick and Jack Smith, they established proof of identity and residence to open a bank account in Chicago, depositing funds obtained through illicit means. Utilizing their fraudulent identity documents, they rented a Willis Knight car, funded by their phony bank account. With their luxury vehicle secured, they embarked on their deadly mission. In truth, Oliver was none other than Lucas Adem, a 19-year-old prodigy fluent in 5 languages, a college graduate, and a nationally renowned ornithologist. With an immeasurable IQ, he hailed from a prestigious lineage, his father being the president of a highly successful steamship company. Lucas had plans to further his education at Harvard University come fall, pursuing yet another degree. Meanwhile, Jack was revealed to be Barrett, an 18-year-old cousin and close friend of Henry's. Their bond extended to frequent tennis matches on Barrett's private court, the first place Henry's father searched for his missing son. Like Lucas, Barrett was a prodigious intellect, setting a record as the youngest graduate from the University of Michigan at just 17. To commemorate this achievement, Barrett's father, a retired Sears executive with considerable wealth, gifted him a custom golf course worth millions. At the time of Henry's murder, Barrett was studying law at the University of Chicago, poised for a successful career. Lucas and Barrett, in their conversations with investigators, emphasized that their motive wasn't financial gain, they were already immensely affluent. Rather, they were driven by their adherence to Nietzsche's concept of the Superman, believing themselves superior beings exempt from conventional morals and laws. In their minds, Henry appeared an easy target, prompting their heinous act. Following Lucas and Barrett's confession, they were promptly arrested, albeit with unusual privileges. A chauffeur was permitted to deliver silk pajamas for their use in custody, and rather than being confined to cells, they were accommodated in a hotel. Despite these leniencies, both received life sentences. Henry's family never fully recovered from his tragic death, with Daniel, his father, passing away a mere 4 years after his son. Lucas met a grim fate in 1943, falling victim to a fellow inmate's violence while incarcerated. Barrett, on the other hand, served his sentence, eventually being granted parole. He lived out the remainder of his days peacefully, succumbing to natural causes in 1979. Join us again next time as we dive deeper into the realms of the peculiar, where every story is a journey into the extraordinary. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop exploring the bizarre world around you. This is Bizarre Buzz, signing off.